The three strokes I'm going to talk about are what's called the tap stroke, the upstroke, and the downstroke. The tap stroke is just a wrist-only motion where you're simply tapping the drum. An upstroke is a wrist-arm combination, and actually what happens is that the wrist leads the fingers up, and so your hand is pulling up like you would do something like this. And a downstroke is the opposite. It's a wrist-arm motion going down. I like to make the analogy as if you're throwing a ball. You wouldn't throw the ball like this. So to try to get much power without utilizing any arm at all is eventually going to probably create some strain if you do it too long. Certain circumstances, fine. A lot of it has to do with how you hold the stick, as I was talking earlier. So you want to keep the back three fingers relaxed around the stick. And then if you use this big motion, they call this a whipping stroke. And Sanford Moeller didn't devise this. He noticed this by Civil War drummers. In fact, if you want more detailed information on this, I recommend you check out Dom Familero's book called It's Your Move, because he goes through and talks about this in quite a bit of detail. And Jim Chapin's video is quite good on this subject as well. Okay? So we got our tap stroke, which is our wrist motion only. We've got the upstroke and then the downstroke. And you'll see drummers do this playing in rock bands quite a lot. It's a very natural motion to get more power without having to squeeze the stick tightly and stiffen up the technique. Okay? So if we look at the sheet that says stroke development technique, there's a bit of symbols that are related to these different strokes. There are a diamond pointing up, a diamond pointing down, and then a circle. The solid ones relate to the left hand. The hollow ones relate to the right hand. And the reason that we have these is so that we don't have to keep writing R's and L's underneath every note. We can just use the symbols, and it goes a little bit quicker. It's like a pictogram. So when we play a tap stroke, it's a wrist-only stroke, and I like to hold the stick parallel to the floor. Now, many of us have been taught, well, you should have the snare drum waist high. How many were taught something to that effect? Okay. Now, the primary reason for having the snare about waist high is so that your forearm can be positioned about parallel to the ground. So what you have is the range of motion of your wrist moving up and moving down. This bye-bye effect that you see little kids do sometimes. So if the drum is positioned too low, then your hands are already positioned up, so you don't have that full range of motion. So what we want to try to accomplish is getting a parallel angle between the drum's head and the sticks. If you drop the stick with it being parallel to the surface and let it bounce, compare that to if I drop it with it at an angle. It absorbs some of the natural response. So to maximize the rebound, you want to play on a surface that's flat compared to the stick's motion. All right. Now, where do we hold the stick? All right. Some of you have just grabbed sticks, you just play, you make sound. But there's actually a sweet spot, and it's called the balance point. And not this type of balance point where you're trying to balance it in the center, but a balance point in where you're holding the stick, and if you drop it, it creates the greatest number of free rebounding strokes. And there's a simple little test that you can do to try to understand this. The first thing I like everybody to do is make a little hook out of their index finger, and then rest the thumb gently on top. Place the stick in the middle of the head so it's flat. Turn your wrist over so it's bent. Pick the stick up with the other hand and just let it fall. It just doesn't have a whole lot of bounce. So then if you scooch your grip up just a little bit further and drop it again, a tiny bit more, but still not much. And if you just keep moving it up, we're starting to get a little more response. That feels pretty good. That's a little light, though it's still there. Okay, right about there. And then if you look down at your stick, you want to see if there's anything written on the stick that helps you to place your thumb in that position. As you become sensitive about developing your technique to a higher level, this is pretty critical to making this stuff easy. It's holding the stick where it really bounces. It just so happens with the Vic Firth sticks, there's a little flag decal that's printed on the stick. That's right where your thumb goes. And it was not by design, it was actually by accident. I spoke to Vic Firth about this, and he just wanted the flag there. Decided after 9/11 he wanted the flag on the stick, and it just happened to be right where the sweet spot is, or what people call the pivot point, where the stick pivots, the point of pivoting, the fulcrum, where you're holding it, the balance point, where the stick bounces freely. Now, in order for the stick to bounce freely, you have to release the back fingers. If you keep the fingers in a cupped position, it just causes the stick to be thrown back down. But if you open the hand up, stick is really free. In fact, you can do that kind of thing. I've even seen that stuff where people have bounced it off the stick just by using the energy of the drum head. Okay? So if you play match grip players in the room, how many? Okay, traditional, left hand. Okay, I'm going to cover both of those techniques. I'm going to stick with match because most of everybody's matched. Okay? So when we hold our stick up to the head, we talked about snare drum height being about waist high, the stick being parallel. Now we've discussed where to hold it. And at the first stage of development, I think it's simplest to use just two fingers, the front-handed grip, your thumb and index finger. I like the thumb to be positioned on the side of the stick with the tip of the thumb pointing to the tip of the stick, so following the natural plane of the stick. And then I like to wrap the index finger around the stick, forming a box with the three sides of the box being the index finger and then the fourth side being the thumb. Okay? This is a very secure yet relaxed grip. And if you hold the stick loosely with these back fingers cupped but extended a little, the stick will bounce freely. Same thing goes for the left hand. And then if you drop your hands to the side and just simply go like this, walk up to the drum, there you have it. That's your basic position. Okay? All right, any questions about any of this so far? Okay, so the tap stroke is a wrist-only motion. We'll use our front hand grip, very simple grip. You may notice the back of the stick on the outside of the hand. There's different opinions about whether the stick should be held in a big wedge, whether they should be parallel. Some drummers play with their thumbs on top, some play with their thumbs to the side. I think most of us gravitate a little bit somewhere in the middle. I use all, especially on the drum set, because the full range of motion would be the thumb maybe to the side over on the hi-hat. As it moves around the drum to the right, it goes on top and down to the low toms on top. Otherwise, you'd have to move your arm out to keep that same position when you can just twist your wrist. Okay? But for rudimental snare drumming, we're going to start with our wrist mostly flat so we can take advantage of this natural range of motion that our wrists produce. Okay? Now, when you hold the stick, I'm going to share with you what I call the natural grip. And any of you can experiment with this, just like you can find the sweet spot or the balance point on the stick. And that is, you hold your hand upside down, you can extend your fingers and just make a fist, and then relax them. And then if you just cup the stick in your hand, just lay it there and turn your hand over, you would see that you have almost a 45-degree angle from the direction that your arm is pointed to where the stick is. You slide it back to where the thumb is on the flag, and you'll notice a little bit of stick in the back of the hand. And this soft, fleshy part will be our shock absorber, to absorb the shock of the stick as it rests against our hand. Okay? But we're not squeezing it. That's important. All right? So we've got our basic angle, which is going to be almost 90-degree angle, big, gigantic piece of pizza wedge. And we're all ready to go through some more strokes. Okay? So we talked about the tap stroke. The next stroke, the upstroke, you begin with your stick basically parallel to the head, bring your wrist up. And then, of course, if you're going to make a big accented stroke, it would come back down, producing a nice sound. You can do soft strokes here, and loud strokes, combining your wrist and arm. And that's a general technical approach that I use. It's pretty much soft motions or wrist motions, and loud motions are wrist-arm combination strokes, which is very much the Moeller method. Okay?